It is the year 1904. A woman named Sabina Spielrein is diagnosed with emotional instability, and even the slightest matters can quickly provoke or irritate her. She is therefore admitted to Bergelsli, a renowned psychiatric institution in Zurich, Switzerland. Later, it is revealed that Sabina suffers from a classic case of hysteria and will undergo treatment under the care of Swiss physician, Dr. Carl Jung. During their first meeting, Dr. Carl stands behind Sabina and notices her difficulty in answering questions, marked by her repeated stuttering. The next day, Dr. Carl and Sabina take a walk in the forest, where he discovers that she possesses an extraordinary ability. She can predict what people are going to say before they speak. When asked about it, Sabina explains that she has an internal angel that assists her with these insights and communicates in German. Dr. Carl remarks that her talent could be beneficial if she chose to pursue her aspiration of becoming a doctor. When Sabina accidentally drops her coat on the ground, Carl picks it up and brushes off the dirt. Unexpectedly, this act angers Sabina, who sharply tells him to stop. A few days later, Carl learns that Sabina is actually a highly educated woman with a degree in medicine. Impressed by her intellect and energy, he invites her to assist him in his research. Sabina eagerly agrees, thrilled by the opportunity to work alongside such a prominent scientist. The story then shifts to Emma, Carl's wife, who has just given birth to a beautiful baby girl. Carl is elated and goes to see his newborn in the maternity ward. However, he senses Emma's disappointment, as she had hoped for a son this time. Carl comforts her and advises her not to dwell on such irrational thoughts. Amidst all this, Carl and Sabina continue their sessions, and Carl uncovers the root cause of her condition. He explains that Sabina's troubles began with humiliation inflicted by her abusive father. Sabina recalls that he made her kiss his hands and spanked her. These actions aroused her, causing her to seek out similar degrading experiences. She had even felt excited when Carl had tapped her coat with his cane earlier. Following this pivotal revelation, Dr. Carl arranges a consultation with the famous Austrian physician, Dr. Sigmund Freud, to discuss their patients and determine the best course of treatment. As the doctors converse, they exchange viewpoints and evaluate each other's ideas, leading to a lengthy discussion that continues for 13 hours without pause. Despite the long exchange, both remain enthusiastic and plan to meet again soon. Later, Carl informs Sabina about his meeting with Dr. Freud. As they talk further, they bond over shared interests. One day, Dr. Freud must leave for urgent business and writes Carl a letter asking him to look after a patient named Dr. Otto Gross, a brilliant but unstable psychoanalyst known for his promiscuity. Freud includes all of Otto's details in the letter, noting metaphorically that Otto might behave like a child and even bite when angered. Carl agrees to help out for the sake of their friendship. He soon visits Otto, hoping to apply his therapeutic methods. Otto quickly displays his uncontrollable desires and brags about his numerous lovers and the children he has fathered. He even advises Carl to engage in sexual relationships with his patients. Otto claims that while monogamy can be burdensome, multiple lovers help maintain vitality and mental wellness. The following day, Sabina enthusiastically assists Carl in his studies and provides companionship. It appears that she has significantly recovered from her mental affliction. However, Carl finds himself thinking about Otto's words and catches himself gazing at Sabina for extended periods, though he manages to restrain his impulses. That evening, Carl and Otto hold another therapy session. Otto inquires whether Carl has ever had an intimate relationship with one of his patients. Carl disapproves and asks Otto the same. Otto confesses that he manipulates his patients into believing that their aversion to him is a psychological problem, a tactic that often succeeds. He boasts of having slept with over 100 women. The next morning, Carl meets Sabina at a park, and they begin discussing the topic of intimacy. When Sabina reveals she has never had sex, it suggests that this may be contributing to her anxiety and depression. She expresses a desire to gain that experience. As Carl hesitates, Sabina takes the initiative and unexpectedly kisses him. Later that night, she invites Carl to her apartment so they can engage in passionate intimacy. In a later therapy session, Otto pressures Carl to give in and be intimate with Sabina. He insists Carl should fulfill her request, as she desires it. Carl remains firm in his decision. Besides recognizing the impropriety of becoming involved with a patient, he doesn't want to be unfaithful to his wife. However, Carl's resolve begins to weaken as the persuasive Otto continues sharing tales of his romantic escapades. Eventually, Carl succumbs to his urges. After witnessing Otto behaving inappropriately with a laborer in the open field, Carl loses control and rushes to Sabina's house, where he ends up sleeping with her. This marks the beginning of their affair, which soon escalates to include more extreme activities, such as spanking and bondage. One day, Emma surprises Carl with a yacht, knowing he had long desired one with red sails. She tells him he deserves everything he wants and calls him the most wonderful man in the world. Seeing her deep love and trust, Carl feels guilt over his betrayal. He then visits Sabina at her home and confesses that they need to end their relationship immediately. However, Sabina persuades him to continue, asking him to treat her as her father once did. In the next sequence, Carl and Dr. Freud reunite after returning from their respective trips and resume discussing their differing views on psychoanalysis. But their friendship begins to erode due to frequent disagreements. During the conversation, Freud brings up a rumor that Carl has taken a patient as a lover. Carl strongly denies the accusation, insisting he is merely supervising her closely. After the meeting concludes, Carl decides he can no longer maintain the secrecy and ends the affair with Sabina, leaving her heartbroken and angry. A few days later, a furious Sabina storms into Carl's office, accusing him of informing her mother about their relationship. She calls him a coward and a betrayer. Carl replies that her mother had already received an anonymous letter about the matter. Ignoring their past connection, he tells Sabina that from now on, he will treat her strictly as a patient. This enrages Sabina even more. She grabs a knife and slashes Carl's face before storming out. Later, she writes to Dr. Freud, asking to meet and discuss her relationship with Carl. Freud reads her letter and writes to Carl for clarification. Carl denies everything, claiming Sabina is trying to destroy his life with false accusations. Freud, trusting Carl due to their close bond, believes him and replies to Sabina, saying he is too occupied with work to meet. He also suggests they handle the matter privately without his involvement. When Sabina returns to Carl's office, overwhelmed by the situation, she discovers that he is leaving the hospital. He is headed to the United States to attend an important conference. Furious over his lies to Freud, Sabina confronts Carl and urges him to tell Freud the truth in writing. She reminds him that she could have ruined his public reputation but chose not to. Moved by her words, Carl finally agrees and writes a full confession to Freud. Freud, while deceived, is not entirely surprised by the revelation. Years later, the story shifts to Sabina visiting Carl at his residence in Switzerland to collaborate on her thesis. They are reminded of their passionate past, which included intimate moments in several places: Carl's bedroom, the hospital, and even the yacht. They decide to be intimate once more, adding another memory to the list. Sabina later discusses her plan to relocate to Vienna after graduating from Zurich. Carl is upset and begs her to reconsider, but she refuses. 2 years pass and Sabina, now a certified psychiatrist, meets with Freud in Vienna. She expresses her support for Freud's methods but emphasizes how vital both he and Carl are to the continued progress of psychoanalysis. Freud, however, shows no interest in reconciling with Carl. The rift between them is so deep they no longer wish to even see one another. 1 year later, Sabina visits Emma at her home. Now married to a Russian doctor, Sabina is pregnant and hoping for a daughter. During their conversation, Emma reveals that Carl's mental state has deteriorated since his falling out with Freud. She asks Sabina to speak with him. Meanwhile, Carl is shown seated calmly by a quiet river. It becomes clear that he is no longer active in his field and has distanced himself from his research. He admits that he's plagued by apocalyptic nightmares, visions of floods destroying entire cities and wiping out the world. Sabina finds the conversation dull and changes the topic, mentioning that she and her husband are returning to Russia. When she inquires about Carl's new romantic partner, Carl says her name is Tony and that she resembles Sabina. He adds that Tony reminds him of the joyful times he once shared with Sabina. Carl acknowledges that his love for Sabina contributed to his personal growth, though he understands there is nothing he can do to change the past. Carl remains lost in his thoughts as Sabina boards her carriage and leaves the city. In the end credits, the destinies of the four analysts are revealed. Otto dies of starvation in Berlin. Sabina, who had trained many future analysts in the Soviet Union, is tragically executed along with her two children by the Nazis in 1942. Freud succumbs to cancer in London in 1939 after being forced to flee Vienna. Carl recovers from his mental breakdown and, before his death in 1961, becomes regarded as one of the greatest psychologists in history. The story of Sabina Spielrein, Carl Jung, and Sigmund Freud is not simply a historical account of psychoanalysis. It is a deeply human exploration of passion, identity, ethics, and the psychological forces that bind and break us. At its core, the film depicts the fragile boundaries between doctor and patient, man and woman, intellect and emotion, love and duty. Sabina's transformation from a psychologically tormented young woman to a determined and pioneering psychoanalyst underscores the powerful themes of resilience, autonomy, and the search for self. Her relationship with Carl Jung is as complicated as it is intense, marked by deep intellectual affinity, emotional vulnerability, and ultimately, a transgression of professional ethics. While their romance may be seen as an expression of repressed desire and mutual fascination, it also reveals the dangers of blurred roles in therapeutic relationships. Carl Jung's inner struggle is equally poignant. Torn between his loyalty to his wife Emma, his admiration for Freud, and his irresistible connection with Sabina, he embodies the conflict between social obligation and unconscious desire. His affair with Sabina opens a door into his own psyche, forcing him to confront suppressed emotions and unresolved fears. In seeking to understand Sabina's trauma, he unearths his own. Sigmund Freud's role, though peripheral at times, is critical in illustrating the ideological rift that eventually defined modern psychology. His gradual estrangement from Jung marks the collision between Freud's rigid scientific rationalism and Jung's more spiritual, symbolic approach. Their friendship, once rooted in mutual respect, slowly unravels under the weight of personal choices and diverging philosophies. The film also reflects on the limitations of early psychoanalysis, particularly its entanglement with gender dynamics, authority, and repression. Sabina is both a victim of her circumstances and an agent of her destiny. Her ability to channel suffering into knowledge, pain into purpose, is what ultimately distinguishes her from both Jung and Freud. Despite being betrayed and misunderstood, she refuses to be diminished by her past. Instead, she evolves into a scholar and healer in her own right. Tragically, the film concludes with the brutal reminder of history's cruelty. Sabina, despite all her achievements, becomes a victim of Nazi violence, along with her children. This ending lends the story a haunting resonance, reminding us that even the brightest minds and most courageous souls are not immune to the devastations of history. In summary, this film is a rich, emotionally layered narrative that explores the intersection of psychology, love, betrayal, and identity. It raises profound questions about morality, healing, and the human capacity for transformation. Through the lives of Sabina, Carl, and Freud, we witness how inner conflict can drive both destruction and discovery, and how sometimes the most intimate relationships leave the deepest marks on our minds and on history.